Before we begin, if you're listening to this alone at night, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more true horror stories, disturbing encounters, and unexplained events uploaded every day. Now lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's get into tonight's stories. The first time I knocked on the wall, I wasn't looking for a hidden room. I was trying to hang a picture. The nail wouldn't go in, so I tapped the wall with my knuckles to find a stud. Most of the wall sounded solid, except for one section that sounded completely hollow. At first, I assumed it was bad construction, an empty cavity between studs. Nothing unusual, but the more I measured, the less the floor plan made sense. Because according to the blueprints, there should have been another room behind that wall, a room that didn't exist, or at least, one that wasn't supposed to. This happened in the spring of 2022. At the time, my wife and I had just purchased our first home outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The house had been built sometime in the early 1970s. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, finished basement, attached garage. The previous owner had lived there for more than 30 years. After he passed away, the family sold the property. The home inspection came back clean. No major issues. Just cosmetic repairs. Fresh paint. New flooring. Normal stuff. For the first several weeks, everything felt perfect. Quiet neighborhood. Friendly neighbors. No problems. Then one Saturday afternoon, I decided to hang family photos in the upstairs hallway. That's when I noticed it. The wall sounded different. Most sections produced a solid thud. One section echoed. Deep. Hollow. My stomach tightened slightly, because the sound stretched almost 6 feet across, far larger than normal spacing between studs. Still, older houses have strange construction. Reasonable explanation, at least initially. Curiosity got the better of me. I found the original floor plan inside a folder left by the previous owners. The measurements immediately confused me. According to the blueprint, the hallway should have been nearly 4 feet narrower. My blood immediately ran cold, because that missing space had to exist somewhere. The realization genuinely unsettled me. I measured every bedroom, every closet, every bathroom. Everything matched, except the hallway. Somehow, there were nearly 4 feet unaccounted for. The mystery bothered me for days. Eventually I borrowed a stud finder, then an inspection camera. I carefully drilled a tiny hole behind a section of trim, fed the camera inside. The screen remained black. Then the flashlight illuminated something. Another wall, much farther back than expected. The realization immediately frightened me, because the empty space appeared large enough for someone to stand inside. I enlarged the opening slightly, adjusted the camera. This time I saw wooden flooring. Not insulation, not framing, an actual floor. My heart immediately started racing, because that meant it wasn't simply empty wall space. It was a room sealed behind another wall. I contacted a contractor. He inspected everything, reviewed the framing, then quietly said something I'll never forget. The wall doesn't belong here. According to him, someone had intentionally built a second wall several feet inside the original hallway. Professionally, carefully, the work looked decades old. The realization genuinely unsettled me. After obtaining the proper permission, we removed a section of drywall. Behind it, another doorway appeared, covered by plywood. Painted over, completely hidden. My blood immediately turned to ice. The contractor removed the plywood. The doorway slowly opened. Cold air drifted out. The smell hit first. Dust, old wood, stale air. The room measured roughly 8 by 12 feet. Completely finished. Wood flooring, wallpaper, electrical outlets, even a ceiling light. Everything looked frozen in time. Furniture remained exactly where someone had left it. Small desk, wooden chair, bookshelf. Nothing appeared disturbed. The realization genuinely fascinated me, until I noticed something strange. There wasn't a single layer of dust on the desk. My stomach immediately tightened, because everything else inside the room was covered, except that one spot, almost as if something had recently been resting there. The contractor noticed it too. Neither of us said anything. We simply looked at each other, then continued searching. Inside the desk sat several old newspapers, family photographs, utility bills, everything dated between 1984 and in 1987. Then the documents suddenly stopped. No explanation. No later records. Nothing. The realization genuinely puzzled everyone. Police became involved, mostly because hidden rooms sometimes reveal evidence connected to previous owners. Investigators documented everything. Nothing illegal appeared. Nothing dangerous. The room simply existed, a forgotten part of the house, or so everyone believed. Then one detective noticed something. Fresh footprints. My blood immediately ran cold, because they weren't ours. The dust covering the floor had been disturbed, leading from the doorway to the desk, then back again. Only one set. Recent enough that investigators couldn't determine exactly when they were made. The realization genuinely terrified me. The previous owner's family insisted no one knew the room existed. Neighbors had never heard about it. Even the original property records made no mention of it. Eventually the investigation ended. No answers emerged. Life slowly returned to normal. Mostly, the hidden room became storage. We installed lighting, shelving, used it occasionally. Then almost 8 months later, while repainting the walls, I noticed something carved into the inside of the old doorway. Letters nearly hidden beneath layers of paint. I scraped them clean. My blood immediately turned to ice, because the carving read, "If you found this room, someone else already did." I stared at those words for a long time, because suddenly, those unexplained footprints didn't feel nearly as old as I'd been telling myself. The bookshelf wasn't built against the wall. It was built into the wall. At first, I thought it was one of the nicest features in the house. Solid oak, floor to ceiling, custom craftsmanship, the kind of thing you don't see in newer homes. Then one afternoon, while moving it to replace the flooring, I noticed something strange. There were scuff marks beneath it, fresh scuff marks, as if someone had been sliding the entire bookshelf back and forth. Recently, and when we finally moved it, we found a staircase. A staircase that didn't appear on any blueprint. A staircase leading somewhere no room should have existed. This happened during the summer of 2021. At the time, my wife and I purchased a farmhouse outside Burlington, Vermont. The property dated back to the 1940s. It had changed owners several times over the decades. The house needed work. A lot of work, but structurally it seemed sound. We planned to renovate one room at a time. The first major project involved replacing the hardwood flooring inside the study. The room contained one large built-in bookshelf. It stretched across nearly the entire wall. Heavy, beautiful, original to the house, or so we believed. While removing the base trim, I noticed something unusual. The flooring beneath the bookshelf looked newer than the surrounding floor, only by a few years. Still, it stood out. Then I noticed the scrape marks. My stomach tightened slightly, because they weren't random. 2 parallel lines, perfectly straight, running nearly 6 feet across the floor. The realization immediately bothered me. It looked exactly like something heavy had been sliding repeatedly. Curiosity took over. My friend helped me empty the shelves. Hundreds of books, boxes, decorations, everything came down. Together we pushed. Nothing happened. The bookshelf refused to move. Then I noticed an old brass hook hidden beneath one of the middle shelves. It blended almost perfectly with the wood. I pulled it. Nothing. Then pushed sideways. A loud click echoed through the room. My blood immediately ran cold, because the entire bookshelf shifted several inches. Slowly, silently, the realization genuinely shocked us. This wasn't simply furniture. It had been built as a door. Carefully, professionally. We slid it farther open. Behind it sat a narrow wooden staircase, descending into complete darkness. Cold air drifted upward. The smell hit first. Damp earth, old wood, something stale. The flashlight beam disappeared into the darkness below. Neither of us spoke, for several seconds. Eventually curiosity won. We descended carefully, step by step. The staircase continued farther than expected. Much farther, nearly 20 steps. Then it opened into a room. Small, concrete floor, brick walls, no windows, no obvious purpose. The room looked surprisingly clean, not abandoned, just empty. The realization genuinely unsettled me, because abandoned rooms usually collect debris, dust, spiderwebs, rodents. This room contained almost none of that. Then I noticed something. Fresh footprints. My blood immediately turned to ice. Only one set, leading toward the far wall, then disappearing. The realization made no sense, because there was no second doorway, no tunnel, nothing. The footprints simply ended. We searched every wall, tapped every section. Nothing hollow, nothing unusual. Then my friend noticed airflow. Very faint. Near the back corner, we examined the bricks carefully. One moved, then another. A hidden panel slowly opened. Behind it, another passage appeared. My stomach immediately dropped, because this one looked newer, much newer. Fresh lumber, modern screws, electrical wiring. Someone had modified the passage recently. The realization genuinely terrified me, because whoever built it hadn't done so decades earlier. Someone had been there, relatively recently. The narrow corridor eventually opened into another chamber, much larger, roughly the size of a one-car garage. Inside sat shelves, plastic storage bins, camping supplies, flashlights, bottled water, canned food. Most items remained within expiration dates. My blood immediately turned cold, because someone had stocked the room. Not years ago. Recently. Very recently. Police were called immediately. Officers searched the entire underground area. No one remained inside. No evidence of forced entry. Nothing. Then investigators discovered something disturbing. A small electrical panel, still active, supplying power to hidden lights beneath the house. Electricity someone had intentionally connected. Without permits, without documentation. The realization genuinely unsettled everyone. The investigation expanded. Detectives interviewed previous owners, contractors, neighbors. Nobody admitted knowing the rooms existed. Then an elderly neighbor stopped by. He watched officers leaving the property, then quietly asked, "You finally found the cellar?" My stomach immediately tightened, because according to him, the original owner used the underground rooms during the Cold War, mostly for storage. Nothing unusual, at least originally. The neighbor believed the entrance had been sealed sometime during the late 1980s. He assumed no one had entered since. Unfortunately, the modern supplies proved otherwise. Someone had. Life slowly returned to normal after the investigation. Mostly, we permanently sealed the hidden passage, installed reinforced concrete, new framing, everything. The story should have ended there. Mostly, it did, until almost a year later. During heavy rain, I noticed muddy footprints inside the study, leading directly toward the bookshelf. My blood immediately ran cold, because the bookshelf no longer opened. It had been permanently sealed. The footprints stopped exactly where the hidden doorway used to be, then turned around, as though whoever left them had expected the entrance to still be there. Police found nothing. Again, no signs of forced entry. No suspect. Nothing. But one detail still keeps me awake. Months later, the contractor who sealed the passage called me. He'd been reviewing renovation photos, comparing before and after measurements. Then he noticed something. Inside one of the early photographs, taken before we opened the bookshelf, someone stood halfway down the hidden staircase, barely visible, watching the camera. The photograph had been taken before we ever discovered the entrance, which means someone was already inside, long before we opened the door. I thought I was measuring the attic. That's all I was doing. My wife and I wanted to finish the space and turn it into a home office. Before hiring a contractor, I climbed into the attic with a tape measure and copied down the dimensions. Nothing unusual, until I compared them to the measurements inside the house. The numbers didn't match. Not by a few inches. By almost 8 feet. 8 feet of empty space that shouldn't have existed. At first, I blamed my math. Then I measured again. And again. The numbers stayed exactly the same. Somewhere inside my house, there was an entire room missing from the floor plan. A room no one had ever mentioned. A room hidden so carefully that whoever built it clearly never wanted anyone to find it. This happened in the fall of 2023. At the time, my wife and I lived outside Salem, Oregon. We had purchased a 2-story house that had been built in the early 1980s. It wasn't historic. It wasn't famous. Just an ordinary suburban home. We'd been living there for about 4 months. Everything had been completely normal. The attic sat above the second floor, mostly unfinished. Insulation, Wooden trusses. Storage boxes. Nothing more. One Saturday afternoon, I climbed up with a flashlight. I measured the length, then the width, copied everything into a notebook. Later that evening, while comparing the measurements downstairs, something immediately stood out. The attic should have stretched farther over the master bedroom. Much farther. Instead, there appeared to be a rectangular section that simply didn't exist. My stomach tightened, because architecture doesn't usually work like that. Space doesn't simply disappear. Still, older houses sometimes have unusual framing. Reasonable explanation, at least initially. The following weekend, I returned to the attic, this time carrying a stronger flashlight. I examined every wall, every beam, every section of insulation. Then I noticed something. One wall looked newer. The plywood wasn't the same color. The screws looked newer, almost like someone had rebuilt only that section. The realization genuinely unsettled me. I tapped the wall. Solid. Solid. Then, hollow. My blood immediately ran cold, because the hollow section stretched nearly 7 feet, much too large to ignore. I carefully removed one piece of trim. Behind it, another layer of plywood. The realization immediately frightened me. Someone had intentionally concealed something. Not accidentally, deliberately. After speaking with a contractor, we carefully removed the inner panel. Cold air drifted out. The smell was unforgettable. Dust, old wood, stale insulation. The opening revealed a narrow doorway, barely wide enough for one person. My flashlight disappeared into darkness. We stepped inside. The hidden room measured roughly 8 feet by 10 feet. Finished walls, wooden flooring, electrical wiring. Someone had clearly spent time building it. The room contained almost nothing. One folding chair, a small table, several empty shelves. Nothing else. The realization genuinely puzzled me, until I noticed the far wall. There was a square opening, roughly 6 inches wide, covered by dark mesh. My stomach immediately tightened. I walked closer, shined the flashlight through, then froze, because I wasn't looking outside. I was looking into my bedroom, directly into my bedroom. The opening sat high inside the wall behind decorative molding, completely invisible from below. The realization hit me harder than anything before. Someone inside this hidden room could watch nearly the entire bedroom. The bed, the closet, the bathroom door, everything, without being seen. My blood immediately turned to ice. The contractor slowly examined the opening, then quietly said something I'll never forget. It wasn't made for ventilation. It was made for watching. The realization genuinely terrified me. Police arrived shortly afterward. Crime scene technicians photographed everything. Dust samples, fingerprints, the entire room. Initially, investigators believed the room had been abandoned for years. Then one detective noticed something unusual. A disposable coffee cup, hidden beneath the folding chair. My stomach immediately dropped, because it wasn't old. The logo belonged to a coffee chain that hadn't existed when the house was built. The cup looked recent, very recent. The realization immediately changed the investigation. Forensic testing estimated the cup had been there only a few months, not decades. Someone had used the room. Recently, the investigators searched more carefully. Behind one loose floorboard, they discovered additional items. Flashlight batteries, a portable phone charger, a notebook. Most pages were blank. Then they reached the final entries. Several handwritten dates. Each date matched weekends when my wife and I had been away visiting family. My blood immediately ran cold, because someone had known exactly when the house was empty. The final page contained only 3 words. Wait until Friday. Friday was only 2 days away. Police immediately increased patrols. Additional cameras were installed around the property. Motion lights, door sensors, everything. Friday night arrived. Nothing happened. Saturday, nothing. Eventually, investigators concluded whoever had been using the room likely realized it had been discovered. The hidden space was permanently sealed. Steel framing, concrete, new drywall. The observation window was removed completely. Life slowly returned to normal. Mostly, nearly a year later, we decided to sell the house. Not because of the hidden room, because my job required relocating. During the final walkthrough, the new owners asked whether the strange patch of fresh drywall inside the bedroom had ever caused problems. I explained what had been behind it. They laughed nervously, then mentioned something that immediately made my stomach drop. The previous evening, their young daughter had pointed toward that exact wall and asked, "Why is there a man standing in the little window?" My blood immediately turned to ice, because the window no longer existed. It had been filled with insulation, covered with plywood, sealed behind drywall, completely inaccessible. The child had never seen photographs of the hidden room. She had no way of knowing a window had ever been there. I didn't know what to say. Neither did the parents. We finished the paperwork, shook hands, and left. I never went back, but one detail still keeps me awake. Several months after moving, one of the detectives who had worked the original case called me. During a review of old property records, investigators located renovation permits from 1986. Most documents were routine: electrical work, roof repairs. Then they found one hand-drawn sketch attached to an inspection request. The sketch showed the hidden room, the observation window, and a label written beside it in pencil. A label that has haunted me ever since. It didn't say storage. It didn't say attic access. It didn't say maintenance space. Instead, someone had carefully written, "Watch room." Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. Just those two words. Sometimes I wonder who built it. Sometimes I wonder how many people knew it existed. But the question that bothers me most is much simpler. If that room was designed to watch the bedroom, who, exactly, was it built to watch?